Hi, this is Brad, and welcome to Brad English Podcast, your daily English listening podcast helping you speak English naturally. In January 2026, a young woman named Sofia Novak, who was 23 years old and living in Budapest, Hungary, decided to count how many English sentences she actually used on a normal working day. She carried a notebook and wrote down every English phrase she heard from podcasts, from colleagues, from her phone, from the shows she watched in the evenings. At the end of the day, she looked at the list. It had exactly 147 sentences on it, and of those, she could confidently say only 31 of them herself, without hesitating. Sophia's story is the reason this episode exists, because what she discovered is what millions of English learners discover every day. There is a very specific set of sentences that native speakers use constantly. And once you know those sentences, English conversation suddenly becomes much less frightening. Hello, and welcome to your English podcast. And welcome to today's episode, which is designed around one simple but powerful idea. There are 150 sentences that native English speakers say every single day without thinking. And today we are going to go through all of them together. Slowly, clearly, and with full explanations. By the end of this episode, these sentences will not be foreign to you. They will be yours. Let us begin right now, starting with the morning. Sophia's first English sentence of every day was always the same. She would look at her alarm on the morning of a weekday and say to herself, quietly, in English, "Okay, it is time to get up." That sentence, just 6 words, is one of the most universally used sentences in the English-speaking world. Every morning, in London, in Sydney, in Toronto, in Dublin, millions of people say some version of those 6 words before they even fully open their eyes. The morning sentences in English carry a very specific quality. They are short, they are physical, and they describe things happening right now to the body, in real time. Sentences like, "I am so tired and I need coffee before I can function," and "I did not sleep well last night" are not complicated. But they are the sentences that open every English morning. Getting out of bed produces the next wave of natural English sentences. When Sophia stood in front of her bathroom mirror on a cold January morning in her apartment near the Danube in Budapest, she would think in English, "I look terrible. I need a shower." Native speakers do this constantly. They narrate their own mornings to themselves, and the language they use is honest, informal, and full of contractions. I am becomes I'm. I do not becomes I don't. I have not becomes I haven't. The contracted forms are not lazy. They are the real, natural spoken form of English. And if your English never uses contractions, it will sound like a textbook reading itself out loud rather than a human being having a morning. The shower and the dressing routine produce some of the most practical and frequently used English sentences you will ever practice. Things like, "I cannot find my keys," and "Where did I put my jacket?" and "I am running 5 minutes late," are sentences that English speakers say on a near daily basis. They use phrasal verbs like run out of, as in, "I have run out of shampoo," and put on, as in, "I need to put on my shoes before I leave." These phrasal verbs, 2 or 3 words that together create a single meaning, are one of the defining features of natural spoken English, and the morning routine is perhaps the best possible context in which to encounter and absorb them for the first time. The final set of morning sentences before leaving the house involves checking and confirming. Do I have everything? And let me just double check my bag. And I think I forgot my phone. Are sentences that serve an immediate practical function and that almost always involve a specific structure in English. The question directed at yourself, the self-reminder, the sudden realization. English speakers do this out loud more than many learners realize, and practicing these self-directed sentences is excellent preparation for the internal English monologue that fluent speakers maintain throughout the day. The breakfast sentences in English are among the warmest and most conversational in the entire daily vocabulary because breakfast, whether eaten alone or with others, always involves choices, preferences, and very human observations about how the morning feels. Sophia, writing in her notebook on the morning of January the 15th in Budapest, noted that between waking up and leaving her house, she had encountered sentences like, "I only have time for something quick," and "Is there any coffee left?" and "I am not really hungry yet, but I should eat something." These sentences carry specific grammatical patterns worth noticing. "I only have time for" is a quantity construction. "Is there any" is a question form for checking existence. "I should" expresses mild obligation. All three are extremely high frequency in real English conversation. The commute is a rich and completely underused context for English practice. In January 2026, Sophia began listening to this podcast on her 20-minute metro ride from her flat in the 7th district of Budapest to her office in the central business area, and she started silently narrating her commute in English. She noticed that the sentences were effortless to generate because the content was right in front of her eyes. "The metro is full this morning, and I hope we do not get delayed at Coletti Station. And there is a new cafe on this street," are all sentences that arise naturally from simply looking at the world and describing it. This practice, narrating your commute in English, is one of the highest value daily habits you can build. Arriving at work or school and starting the day produces a distinct cluster of English sentences that are critical for anyone who uses or wants to use English professionally. "Good morning, how are you?" is obvious, but beneath it is a layer of much more nuanced social English. "How was your weekend?" And "Did you see the email I sent you yesterday?" And "I have a deadline this afternoon, so I need to get started." These sentences operate on the social and professional register simultaneously, and knowing them gives you currency in any English-speaking workplace, university, or professional setting. The emotional quality of the first hour at work is also embedded in English sentences that native speakers use constantly, but that learners rarely practice. "I am already behind, and it is only 9 o'clock." And "This is going to be a long day." And "Okay, let me focus and get this done," are sentences that combine realistic self-assessment with motivational forward motion. Practice them, and they will make you sound like someone who actually lives in the language, not just someone who is studying it. You now have the first 75 sentences of your morning in English. But here is the part that most learners completely miss: the sentences that build the deepest connections, the ones that make people remember you and want to keep talking to you, all come in the afternoon and the evening. Stay with me, because part 2 is where the real conversational English begins. By the time Sophia reached the afternoon of her January count, she had realized something that surprised her deeply. The English sentences she found hardest to produce herself were not the complicated ones. They were the medium ones, the moderately complex sentences that fall between a simple phrase and a full grammatical construction. Things like, "Could you send me that when you get a chance?" And "I was just wondering if you had a moment to look at this," and "Let me get back to you on that by the end of the day." These sentences require a knowledge of politeness structures, conditional softening, and time commitment language that no basic vocabulary list ever teaches. Marcus Webb is 29 years old and works as a software engineer in Melbourne, Australia. In March 2026, he started a deliberate practice of noting every English sentence he heard from his international colleagues on video calls, and the pattern he found was identical to Sophia's. The sentences that came up again and again were not technical. They were social and organizational. "Let me share my screen. And can everyone hear me clearly? And I think we might have lost someone. Is Claire still on the call?" And "I will put the notes in the shared folder after this." These are the sentences of professional English in 2026, and they are remarkably similar across industries, countries, and contexts. The task management sentences of the working afternoon are another essential cluster. I am working through the backlog, where backlog means a list of unfinished work that has accumulated, and I should be done with this by 3 o'clock, and I need to prioritize this because the deadline moved up, are sentences that signal competence and reliability in English. They show that the speaker understands time, responsibility, and professional accountability. Accountability means being responsible for the results of your actions. When you can produce these sentences naturally and confidently, you cross a threshold in professional English from the person who is managed to the person who manages. Questions are the engine of English conversation, and the afternoon produces a particularly interesting set of them. Do you have a few minutes? And would it be possible to reschedule our meeting? And is there anything I can do to help with this? Are all questions that require what linguists call face-saving language, words and structures that protect the dignity and comfort of the person being asked. Would it be possible? Is softer and more polite than can you? Is there anything I can do? Is more humble and collaborative than I will do this. Mastering these subtle distinctions is what transforms functional English into fluent English. Lunch is one of the most socially productive times of the English-speaking day, and the sentences that circulate during it are remarkably consistent across cultures and countries. Sophia, in her January 2026 notebook in Budapest, recorded that lunchtime English includes 3 main categories. Food talk, which involves sentences like, I brought leftovers from yesterday, and this place has really gone downhill recently, where gone downhill means quality has decreased. Life update talk, which involves, how is your sister doing? And did you ever sort out that issue with your landlord? And plans talk, which involves, what are you doing this weekend? And are you going to the event on Friday? All 3 categories require the same underlying skill, the ability to move between topics naturally, without awkward gaps or unnatural transitions. Small talk in English is a topic that causes enormous anxiety in learners, partly because it is undervalued by formal education, and partly because it seems easy but is actually quite sophisticated. Marcus Webb in Melbourne found that his English small talk became dramatically better, not when he learned more vocabulary, but when he learned more transition phrases. Phrases like, oh, speaking of which, and that reminds me, and actually, on a completely different note, are the invisible connectors that keep conversation moving. They signal to the listener that the speaker is engaged, present, and interested. Without them, conversation becomes a series of isolated exchanges. With them, it becomes a flowing, natural dialogue. The mid-afternoon energy drop is real and universal, and English has a specific vocabulary for it. I am absolutely exhausted, and I need another coffee. This is going to be a long one, and I cannot concentrate anymore. I need to step away for a few minutes are sentences that every English speaker knows and uses. The afternoon is also the time when planning and anticipation language peaks. I cannot wait to get home tonight, and I have such a nice evening planned. And only 2 more hours, and then I am done. These forward-looking, hopeful sentences are important because they reveal one of the key emotional rhythms of English conversation, the movement from the work of now toward the pleasure of later. You have now heard 120 sentences that native speakers use every single working day. But the evening sentences, the ones that happen when the work is over and people are finally themselves, those are the sentences that contain the most emotion, the most humanity, and the most complex English of all. Part 3 is where you will find the sentences that will make your English unforgettable. Keep listening. When Sophia got home on the evening of January the 15th in Budapest, she sat down at her kitchen table and looked at her notebook. 131 sentences. That was what she had counted in a single working day. And the number felt both large and small at the same time. Large because she had not realized how much English moved through a single day. Small because she knew that a native speaker would have produced perhaps 3 or 4 times that number. Coming home in English begins with a very particular emotional register: relief. Finally home. And I thought today would never end, and I am absolutely shattered. Where shattered is a British English informal term meaning extremely tired, are the greeting sentences of evening, the ones people say to themselves or to whoever is at home. The kitchen and the cooking space produce some of the most beautifully ordinary English sentences in the daily vocabulary. What are we having for dinner? And I do not feel like cooking tonight. Can we order something? And I am just going to make something simple. And that smells incredible. What is in it? Are sentences full of natural language patterns. The collaborative question, the preference statement, the plan minimization, and the sensory observation. Cooking English also involves a set of action verbs that are completely practical and highly memorable. Chop, stir, drain, season, simmer, preheat, fold in, and let it rest. When these verbs are heard in context repeatedly, they enter the long-term vocabulary naturally and permanently. The kitchen and the cooking space produce some of the most beautifully ordinary English sentences in the daily vocabulary. What are we having for dinner? And I do not feel like cooking tonight. Can we order something? And I am just going to make something simple. And that smells incredible. What is in it? Are sentences full of natural language patterns, the collaborative question, the preference statement, the plan minimization, and the sensory observation. Cooking English also involves a set of action verbs that are completely practical and highly memorable. Chop, stir, drain, season, simmer, preheat, fold in, and let it rest. When these verbs are heard in context repeatedly, they enter the long-term vocabulary naturally and permanently. Relaxing in English involves a vocabulary of comfort that is deeply personal and deeply human. I'm just going to sit here for a moment, and can we put something on in the background? And I need to switch off tonight, where switch off means to stop thinking about work and stress and allow the mind to rest, are sentences that describe the transition from the public self of the working day to the private self of the home evening. This transition is important in English conversation because the language shifts register dramatically. The formal politeness structures of the office disappear and are replaced by contractions, informal vocabulary, and the comfortable directness of people who trust each other. The social evening, whether with family, friends, or a flatmate, produces English that is perhaps the most naturally flowing of all, because it involves genuine, back and forth, real shared history, and the full emotional range of human connection. Sentences like, "You will not believe what happened to me today," and "I was thinking about you earlier, actually," and "Tell me everything, start from the beginning," are the sentences of evening English at its most alive, most human, and most worth practicing. The night routine sentences carry a specific quality of wind down and reflection that is distinct from any other part of the day. I should probably get to bed soon, and I have an early start tomorrow, and I am just going to do a few things, and then I am done for the night. Are sentences that use what linguists call hedging language, softening words like probably and just, and a few that make statements feel less absolute and more naturally human. Hedging is a defining feature of spoken English, and one of the things that makes native speakers sound relaxed and natural rather than stiff and formal. The final half hour before sleep is a deeply reflective time, and English has beautiful language for it. Today was actually a really good day, and I feel like I got a lot done, and I need to remember to deal with that thing tomorrow. And I am grateful it is Friday are sentences that combine self-assessment with forward planning and emotional acknowledgement. The word actually is particularly important in the first of these sentences. It implies that the day exceeded expectations, that something positive happened that was slightly surprising. Actually is one of the most culturally embedded words in conversational English, and learning to use it naturally is a significant step towards sounding fluent. On the evening of January the 15th, Sophia closed her notebook at her kitchen table in Budapest. 147 sentences. She looked at the list for a long time. Then she picked up her phone and opened her English podcast app, and she listened to 30 minutes of slow, clear English before she fell asleep. 3 months later, in April 2026, Sophia gave a full 10-minute presentation to her European team entirely in English, without notes, without hesitating, without freezing. She had not taken a formal English course. She had not moved to an English-speaking country. She had listened every day. She had counted her sentences, and she had trusted the process. Her story is proof that the method works. The final sentence of the day, the last English thought before sleep, can be the most powerful practice of all. Sophia ended every day with the same 3 words: improving every day. Not a long sentence, not a complicated structure, just a commitment. If you want one thing to take from this episode beyond all 150 sentences, take that. Improving every day. Say it tonight in English before you close your eyes. Today you heard 150 sentences that native English speakers say every single day, organized across your entire waking life, morning, afternoon, and evening. You heard the sentences of Sophia from Budapest and Marcus from Melbourne, 2 real learners in 2026 who proved that this method works when you apply it consistently and daily. You heard the language of mornings and commutes, of workplaces and lunches, of kitchens and evenings, and that quiet moment before sleep, when the day settles and you finally have a moment to breathe. What I want you to do before this episode ends is choose 5 of those sentences, just 5, that felt most natural and most like something you would actually say in your real life. Write them down. Say them out loud 3 times each, right now. Then use at least one of them in a real situation tomorrow. Not in practice. In a real conversation with a real person in the real world. That is the bridge between a learner and a speaker, and it is a bridge you cross one sentence at a time. Come back to this episode. Listen again next week. Notice which sentences feel more familiar the second time. That feeling of familiarity is fluency being built, one layer at a time. You are doing something real here, something that will change your life. Keep going. I will see you in the next episode.